Thank you for allowing me to come and talk to you. My name is Johnny Surles. I live down in Pollocksville. I'm a retired state trooper. That's how I got involved in this. Came on the highway patrol in 1972, went to Jones County and worked Jones and Lenoir County for 9 years as a trooper. Then I made first line sergeant and worked those same two counties as a line sergeant until 1993. Then went to Raleigh as a first sergeant and got promoted to lieutenant and retired in 98. Been back in Jones County. Worked a little bit, well, a whole lot with Craven Community College. Now I'm the General Secretary for the Scottish Rite Valley in New Bern. I work out of the office there in front of the York Rite Temple in a little small building called the Scottish Rite Temple. You didn't come to hear about me. You came to hear about Richard Floyd McCoy. I'm not here to try and make, whatever you do, don't think I'm here trying to convince you. I'm going to tell you what I did, what I know, who I've talked to, and you make a decision whether Richard Floyd McCoy and Dan Cooper are one and the same. Richard Floyd McCoy, also known as D.B. Cooper or Dan Cooper, this is the real and maybe the final story. D.B. Cooper hijacked a Boeing 727 aircraft in the airspace between Portland, Oregon and Seattle, Washington on November the 24th. Remember that date, November the 24th, 1971. He extorted $200,000 in ransom, which is equivalent to $1.5 million today. A lot of people ask me today, why only $200,000? Well, in 1971, that was worth about $1.5 million. And he parachuted to an uncertain fate. Despite an extensive manhunt and protracted FBI investigation, the perpetrator has never been located or identified. The case remains the only unsolved air piracy in commercial aviation history. And if you notice there, I put according to the FBI. Me and the FBI have a little, first of all, are there any FBI agents in here? He demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000. He wanted all the luggage taken off the plane. And he said, when all the luggage gets off, I'll let all the passengers go except the flight crew and the stewards. He said, remember this, he sat in the back of the plane, 3 seats from the rear on the right side. And on this occasion, he had the stewardess, when he was telling her stuff, she would sit directly beside him. The 3 seats from the back on the rear on the right side of the plane. He gave the below information on landing in Seattle. After he hijacked the plane, he told them where to park the plane. He told them how many people he wanted to come out and fuel the plane. He told which side of the plane to park the fuel truck on, which was, there's the plane, this is the cockpit. He wanted the plane parked at about 11 o'clock. And he told them that when they take off, he wanted them to use this runway. And he told them the speed of the plane. He told them he wanted the flaps in a certain position. And he basically gave them a flight plan. And he gave them all this on FAA, Federal Aviation paper that he had with him. After taking off, he stated, if followed by jets or helicopters, we will blow up the plane. Somewhere over the northwest United States, there was a thump in the light indicating the door opened. The crew went back to check on him. He had 3 parachutes left in him. And remember, they gave him 4. When they went back after the first bump, there was 3 parachutes left. This happened one more time. The last time all the parachutes were gone and Cooper was gone. No, nothing back there. He landed the plane, obviously. There was a total of 4 parachutes. They were not all bright pink. 3 of them were pink. One was white, but 3 were pink. Now, Cooper left 2 pieces of evidence on the plane. The FBI kept this a secret because they knew they would be copycats, and they needed something that only Cooper would know. Cooper has never been heard from since, except in 1980, an 8-year-old boy found $5,800 in $20 bills in the Columbia River on a sandbar. There is a composite drawing of Dan Cooper. Dan Cooper. First, is anybody related to the McCoys? Does this look like Richard?
Yeah. It looks like
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And I'll show you. But remember, it's a composite drawing. Here is a bulletin. The bulletin is something that the FBI puts out as soon as possible after something happens. They don't wait 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 days. They get it out as soon as it can. White male, age mid-40s, 5'10", 6 foot, 170 to 180 pounds. Olive complexion, Latin appearance, eyes possibly brown, he wore sunglasses, voice low, spoke intelligently, no particular accent. Characteristics, heavy smoker, he smoked Raleigh filter tip cigarettes. Wearing apparel, he's wearing a black suit, black narrow tie with a tie tack, brown shoes. He had a briefcase, he had a London fog coat over his arm. But that information there came from the people that were on the plane, the people that sold him the ticket. So and they got that out as quick as they could. He bought the ticket under the name Dan Cooper. The news media was interviewing a police officer that night, and he mistakenly said D.B. Cooper. And undoubtedly that took. It sounded better than Dan Cooper. Okay. There is a 727 airplane, but there's a door right underneath it that opens down like that. That's what he jumped off. He stood right there where that guy was and bailed out. This is basically the end of the story of the D.B. Cooper story as told by the FBI. They pursued thousands of leads, but it ends here according to the FBI. Now let's look at some things and see if we agree with them. Richard Floyd McCoy grew up in the Cove City area, Craven County. He knew this area literally like the back of his hand. He eventually joined the Army and left the area. Later he married to Karen and they had two kids, Richard III and Shantae. In 1972, they were living in Provo, Utah. Richard was a student at Brigham Young, and at times were tough for the family of five. His sister-in-law, Denise, was living with him. Richard was supporting the family of five on $370-some a month, and he's supporting Shantae, Rick, his wife, Karen, Denise, and himself. 5 people on that kind of money. Times were tough. On April 7, 1972, during a stopover in Denver, Colorado, Richard boarded a United Airlines Flight 855 using the name James Johnson. The aircraft was a Boeing 727 with aft stairs, like you saw just a few minutes ago. The same equipment used in the D.B. Cooper incident. McCoy demanded 4 parachutes and that all the luggage be taken off the plane except his. He wanted his luggage put inside the plane. Remember that. He let everyone go but the stewardesses and the flight crew, just like Cooper did. He demanded $500,000 this time and diverted the plane from Denver to San Francisco. He had a novelty hand grenade in his hand. When the stewardess came back, he pulled the pin and gave her the pin and said, "Give this to the captain." The FBI were trying their best to delay him because they were positive at this time that they were dealing with D.B. Cooper. And he gave the following info for the pilots. We always use, Cooper always used the plural, we. This is McCoy. We have a grenade. The pin has been pulled. We have pistols. They're loaded. We have C4 plastic explosives. It's a long ways to the ground. We're taking this plane to San Francisco, not Los Angeles. Secure permission to land on runway 19 at exactly 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are familiar with the airport and will know if we are being tricked. Have a fuel truck waiting with 6 hours of jet fuel, only 2 people on the truck. After landing, all vehicles will be parked 100 feet from the nose of the truck plane on the left side. Heard that before? 11 o'clock. We want $500,000 in cash, different denominations, 4 commander parachutes with stopwatch and wrist altimeter. Get them from Perry Stevens Equipment Company in Oakland. The stewardess I gave the note to, I'll call her Jane, will be the only one we'll talk to. You will read quickly and return all notes to me. Don't tell the passengers what's going on. Have everything ready when we land in San Francisco. Again, he told them where to park the plane. He told them how many people he wanted to fuel the plane, only 2. He told which side of the plane to park the fuel truck on. He told which runway to use on takeoff. He told them the speed of the plane when they took off. He told them what degrees he wanted the flaps in. He basically gave them a flight plan, and guess what kind of paper it was on? Federal Aviation Administration paper. And again, he demanded $500,000 and 4 parachutes. The FBI got smart this time. They put tracking devices inside the parachutes. They were trying to delay the takeoff because they were sure they had D.B. Cooper, so they were doing everything they could to take their time. They were lying to him, telling him the money weren't there yet, and they were having a problem getting the money. McCoy became agitated and told him to take off now, and he gave them the following note. Sometime in the airport, he had bought a aviation magazine, and they put it in a brown paper bag. He tore off a piece of that bag and wrote, "Everybody off now except the stewardesses. They stay put, get the hell off the ground, be quick about it, use this runway." He gave that to the stewardess. She took it up, she gave it to the captain. The captain read it, turned around and threw it in the trash can. He told the tower, "We gotta leave, he's getting ready to blow up the plane." So they took off. About 15 minutes later, the stewardess remembered the captain throwing that note in the trash can. She went and got it out of the trash can and put it down in her bra. Smart. This time, McCoy sat in the back of the plane, 3 seats from the rear. But this time he put the stewardess in front of him, in the seat in front of him. Cooper, during the Cooper flight, the other pilot would look through the peephole. There was a peephole in the door leaving the cockpit going to the back. He was watching, and that was made public. So Richard put a piece of tape over the peephole, and he had the stewardess sit in the seat in front of him so they could still talk, but she couldn't eyeball him like the other one did. Somewhere over Utah, there was a thump. A light come on indicating the door was open. One of the tracking devices activated on one of the parachutes. They went back to look. He's still there. There's 3 parachutes. A few minutes later, another thump. Second tracking device activates on the second parachute. They go back and look. He's still there. A few minutes later, another thump. Third tracking device activates. He's still there. A little bit later, the fourth thump, fourth tracking device. And guess what? He's still there. Later, another thump. They go back and look. 5 thumps. They go back and look the 5th time. There ain't nobody there. He's gone. This part right here, this says McCoy had a neighbor that was a Utah State Trooper. He was not his neighbor, but they were real good friends. They were in the National Guard together. And about 2 weeks before the McCoy hijacking, this trooper and Richard were talking. And Richard told this trooper, "This is a foolproof plan. You can hijack a plane and get away with it. Nobody will question you. You won't get caught. It's a foolproof plan." Well, the trooper didn't want to he didn't want to discuss hijacking a plane, so he sort of brushed him off and changed the subject. 2 weeks later, trooper opens up the newspaper and he sees there's been another hijacking. So he calls the FBI and says, "You might want to talk with my neighbor." So they go to the neighbor's house. Richard was with the Utah National Guard, and on that day that the FBI went to his house, he was actually flying a helicopter looking for the culprit. FBI goes to the house, knock on the door. Karen comes to the door. She's all smiles, just greeting, "Hey, how you doing?" And she says, they flash, "FBI, we're looking for Richard McCoy." She tries to shut the door, and they literally get a foot in the door, and she starts crying, and there's a big scene. Instead, they sent agents to the federal magistrate to get warrants, search warrants for the house. But while they were gone, before they got back, the FBI goes in the house. Well, now anything that they get is a fruit of the rotten vine. They go in the bedroom, and in the bedroom in the closet is 2 duffel bags. In one duffel bag is a flight suit with a helmet. Put my luggage on the plane. In his luggage was a flight suit with a helmet on it. And the other duffel bag was $490,970. He spent $30. He bought a milkshake. He gave a guy $5 to give him a ride into town. And the next night, he took Karen and Denise and the 2 kids out to eat. He spent a total of $30 of the $500,000. So they got all but $30 of the $500,000. They got it back. 2 for the milkshake, 5 for the ride, 23 for the meal. The FBI confirmed the handwriting that the stewardess put in brassiere, confirmed the handwriting that it was McCoy's. He was arrested and charged with air piracy. He was tried and found guilty. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. When asked by the judge, something that happens in every trial, the judge will ask, was there anything you'd like to say? Richard stood up and said, yes, Judge, I need to let you know that you don't have a prison that will hold me. I will escape. The judge said, let's give it a shot. He goes in a holding cell. It's not a bathroom. He goes into, well, it was a bathroom in a holding cell. There is a drunk inside there. He changes armbands with him, and he stays there for a day. They think he's gone. He stays there for a day, and there's a slight fight when they figure out who he is, but they bring him in custody again and take him on to Lewisburg. But he did escape. He arrived at federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. That says January. It was actually August. Not that it matters, but it was August. Upon entering the prison, he made friends with 3 other guys, all of them under 6 foot tall, because he had a plan. When he went in prison, he already had a plan, and his plan was to escape. He wanted people under 6 foot tall because he knew the corn would get about 6.5, 7 foot tall, and he didn't want anybody that was going to be sticking their old bald head up out of the corn. So he wanted somebody short. And those people were Melvin Walker, Larry Bagley, and Joseph Havel. They immediately began planning a prison break. On Monday morning, they'd get up, they'd do 50-yard wind sprints all day long. On Tuesday, they pump iron all day long. On Wednesday, they run a marathon. They run the prison enclosure, round and around, round and around. They start back the next day, 50-yard wind sprints. They do that every 3 days. It's an exercise regime. When I'm getting ahead of myself, but I captured Havel. When I carried Havel to the ground, that 63-year-old man was as hard as that tabletop. Had arms on him like that. I mean, he was as solid as he could be. And I'll jump ahead to something else he told me. He said he had a really heavy accent. He was from, I can't remember where he was from, but he had a real heavy northern accent. He said, I don't know why you're doing this. We haven't done anything. I said, yeah, you. I said, well, where'd you get all this money? He said, I got it from tilling the soil. And I said, the only soil you ever tilled, you might have been breaking some rocks, but you ain't. But immediately, as soon as Richard made friends with these other 3 guys, they immediately started planning a prison break. There are the 3 guys. There's Richard, Walker on the top left, Havel, and Bagley. All 4 of them made the FBI's top 10 list. Walker, Havel, and Bagley all said, are you D.B. Cooper? And Richard would never answer him. He'd just turn around and walk off. He wouldn't say yes, he wouldn't say no. He'd just turn around and walk off. He'd never say one way or the other. Walker was 35 in 1974. He was from Morley, Missouri. Former 10 most wanted fugitive. On November the 9th, 74, Walker was apprehended in Virginia Beach. After entering a house staked out by the FBI, he didn't enter the house. He had a 2-block chase. Now, I've been in law enforcement for 50-some years. I never heard of a 2-block chase. Here's a guy that's serving a life sentence for, and there's a reason for telling this, life sentence for bank robbery. He has broke out of he now has charges for breaking out of federal prison, interstate flight, kidnapping, stolen vehicle, and another bank robbery charge. The man served 7 years. In federal prison time, when you get 20 years, federal time is hard time, and it's day for day. You get 20 years, you serve 20 years. You don't get out for good behavior. This man served 7 years with all those charges against him. We'll figure out why in a little bit. Havel was from Philadelphia. He was an old man of 60 years old at the time of his escape. He was described by the prison guards as a loner, and the guards were most surprised of him being involved in the escape. He was convicted in '67, one of the 4 men involved in the robbery of an armored vehicle. While serving time for that robbery, he escaped from the state prison, robbed a bank in Reading on March 8, '72, and was caught, convicted, and sentenced to 10 years. He was put in Lewisburg Penitentiary. Larry Bagley was from Des Moines, Iowa. He was 36 at the time of his escape. He was serving 20 years for bank robbery. Bagley, Havel, and Walker had all attempted escape before and had additional years added to their sentences for their attempts. This is Lewisburg Prison. This corn used to come right up to the prison. And again, Richard had noticed that, and that's the reason he wanted people under 6 foot tall to be his friends. That's the prison. One of the most secure prisons in the United States. There's only been 4 people to escape. On August the 10th, McCoy and his three comrades, McCoy was out running, and they had it planned for this day because every day at a certain time, a trash truck would pull up, gate would open, he'd pull in, gate closed, second gate open, he'd pull in, do a U-turn, come up to a Dipsy dumpster here. This gate would obviously close. They would back out and they'd go out the same way. On August the 10th, Richard was running. He had timed his run so he'd be coming back right where they were going across the fence. He and his 3 buddies, they had blankets, they had sheets, and they had towels. They threw it over the Constantine wire, and they made it across. They went to the truck. The two guys in the truck took off running. They got in the trash truck. The towers saw what was happening. They opened fire on them. What better place would be than in a trash truck, somebody shooting at you? I mean, this thing's that thick. You know, it's like an armored vehicle. They come around, they hit the first gate. They hit it so hard that it went up in the air and come down on top of the trash truck. When they hit the second gate, they knocked it this way, but when they hit it, this gate come up that was on top of the truck, came up and dug down in the dirt and blocked the prison's exit. The only way to get to that road that the 4 bad guys were on was to go 8 miles around, come around. Somebody probably with DOT probably lost a job. But, thus they had an 8-mile head start on the law enforcement. The FBI and all their, let me ask you a question. At this point right now in this story, who does it sound like is the ringleader? Okay, well the FBI assumed they were going to Tennessee. The ringleader was not from Tennessee, he was from Cove City, North Carolina. And the Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Department, the SBI, nobody in North Carolina knew anything unless you just happened to see a little blip on the news and you got to remember, 72, you didn't have Google and news, you had the local newspaper and we had Channel 12, but they didn't know nothing about it. But
I was 4, you can't believe it.
But they told everybody in the state of Tennessee that where Melvin Walker was from, they told everybody in the state of Tennessee that these bad guys may be coming to their town, but they never told us a word about it. We didn't know anything at all about the escape. They had a 7-mile head start. Within an hour, they drove the truck into the woods. They went by a house and saw it had a horseshoe drive that went around behind it. There was a car sitting in it. About a quarter of a mile down the road, there was a path that went up into the woods. They pulled the trash truck up into the woods, got out, went through the woods, and went to the house. Fortunately for them, there was 3 elderly women and an elderly man. The man had gone in, he'd left something in the house, and he'd gone in, the 3 women were sitting in the car talking ugly about him being in the house. And they come up, they took the 3 women, carried them in the house. Of course, they were scared to death. But the women did say, and the man did say, they treated them with respect. Nobody hurt them. They were very gentle with them, didn't hurt them, but they tied them up. Matter of fact, they tied them up, and before they went out and stole their car and left. Before they got to the end of the driveway, they were already loose. But they're elderly people. Closest telephone is a mile down the road. So the man had to go a mile down the road. So they probably had another hour now on law enforcement, and they got another vehicle. If you can tell anything about this map, Trenton, Cove City. Now keep in mind, Highway 70 wasn't here at the time. That was all woods. So Trenton, Cove City, 58 going to Pottsville, 58 going to Kinston. And we're somewhere right along in, probably somewhere right on there. Monday night, August 12th, 1974, I'm sitting in Trenton. If you know anything about Trenton, the courthouse is right here. This is 58 going to Kinston, 58 going to Pottsville. I was sitting just about where that car is. The station in Sunoco was closed. I was sitting right there facing this direction. There was another trooper sitting beside me facing the opposite direction. And we were that close to solving all the problems in the world. We were real close, talking. And I look, when you work a rural county, back then there was about 9,000 people in our county. When you work a rural county, you know people. When there's only 9,000 of them, you know them. And you know what cars belong where and what cars don't belong where. Well, on this night, I'm facing that stoplight, and I see that car pull up to the stoplight and stop, and I'm thinking to myself, that don't fit. That car don't belong in Trenton on Sunday night with people in it. It's just something about it. But I didn't say anything to my buddy. The next day, after the dust had settled, after all we went through the next day, he told me, he said, I remember that car. I saw it in my mirror last night in Trenton. And I said, I did too. And we both remembered that car. But that's the car that they stole from the elderly people in Pennsylvania, green Ford Fairlane. On Tuesday, August 13th, around 9:15, I had just come in from Paulsville on 58. I got to the courthouse and I made a left turn headed towards Kinston. Radio station called me and said the bank in Paulsville's just been robbed. 4 white males in a dark green Monte Carlo. Last seen headed 17 north. I turned around in Trenton on 58, come back to the courthouse. I went beside the courthouse and went out across the river by the old elementary school, going to 1002. I got to 1002, I made a right turn, and keep in mind I'm going blue light and siren, and I'm going a little bit above the speed limit, okay? And I'm going down 1002. When I got probably 6-8 miles down 1002, I meet this Ford Fairlane. And I remember in my mind when I went by him, there's only 2 people in it. And I remember in my mind, I know that car. Oh yeah, that's the car I saw last night. But I'm looking for a dark green Monte Carlo. So how many remember Diamond Gems?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody in here raised their hand. Except the
You know what you guys were doing in the 70s.
yeah. Well, on Sunday night, before all this broke on Tuesday, they stole Diamond Jim's Monte Carlo, and it looked exactly like that car right there. So on Tuesday morning, they come out of Paulsville on 17. Just outside of Paulsville, there's an old loop road, Killis Murphy Loop Road, halfway down into Oak Grove. Okay, they were at the Newbern end of Killis Murphy Road. Okay, they left the Ford Fairlane there. They all 4 got in the Monte Carlo. They went down, robbed the bank. They went into town, turned around, and come over. And I got some. That's the bank right there. They come into town. They turned around somewhere and pulled back up, parked over here, going the wrong way. They went in the bank. So my wife is standing there talking to the manager. She feels something in her back. And she said, "Bill Allen, what are you doing?" And it wasn't Bill Allen, it was Richard McCoy, and he had a .38 pistol in her back. And he got her out, and they tried to put everybody in the vault, but the vault had a safety lock on it, so they couldn't put them in the vault. They got the money. They all had on orange ski masks. They got the money. They ran back out, and because they couldn't lock them in the vault. When they ran out, when they heard the last door shut, they all come out and ran to the windows, and that's what they saw was the Monte Carlo. And they counted them, they could see there was 4. So they jumped in the car and they took off this way, going toward Newbern. And that's when they give the radio traffic out to us. And that's the bank there, and they were parked here and went that way. That's going to Newbern. This is Killis Murphy Road. Paulsville's right about here. Bender Sign Company is right about here. This is Killis Murphy Road. This is where they were. There's an old there was a 2-story shanty and a great big oak tree as big around as this right there. That's where they left the car. And I told you I had a lot of connections in this thing. I met my wife in the robbery. That later on that day I met her. I live right along here. So when they left, they turned and come this way, went by my house. They went to Claude Banks Road, took a right, went over and got on 1002. And the way I came to get here tonight, I thought about it, I'm traveling the same road they traveled coming to Cove City. When they got to Davenport's Crossroad, they turned right on 41. 41 they came, and they went to Heath Swamp Road. Fortunately, our helicopter was in Havelock that day doing drug eradication. So we called the helicopter. That was highly unusual because it's based out of Raleigh and we couldn't have got it that quick. So we called the helicopter, came in. Trooper Fred Sullivan got in the helicopter with 2 FBI agents. I had 2 FBI agents and an ALE agent in my vehicle. We had, this is 1972. This is all the cavalry we had then. There wasn't nobody, it was a Tuesday, there's nobody else working. And a deputy had an ALE and an FBI agent with him. So we're going to Cove City because now the FBI has finally, it's probably Richard McCoy. So we come to Cove City. Heath Swamp Road is the first road I come to. It's a dirt road. The helicopter's in the air following us. I make a left on Heath Swamp. This is the first road we come to. I turn, and when I got right here, you see that? That's a path. And you can't really tell it, but see that right there? That's another path. That's a creek. But when I got right there, Sullivan in the helicopter called me. He said, I see them. They're down that first path. We were right here. I turned in here. They were somewhere right along here, and this is what they were doing. The car was parked here. Here's the driver's door. Walker, McCoy, the car hood, Havel, and Bagley. And Richard was doing this. They were counting out the money. Counting out the money. They saw and heard the helicopter. When they did, they ran. 2 ran that way, and Richard and Walker ran this way. I started down this path, and Sullivan called me, and he said, don't, now he didn't know who was who. He knew there was four males down there. He said, don't go down that path, go to the other path. So I backed out, come over here, and there's that, see the other path? I'm beating it with that great old big 440 Plymouth down that path, and I've got just about that much room. There's corn on this side just beating me to death. There's limbs ruined, my car scratched all up the side, and I'm riding down the road, and actually like this because I got my gun out. I'm riding down that road, and right about, it was probably right along there, Havel and Bagley come out of the woods, and literally my front bumper stopped at their kneecaps. I almost killed both of them right there. When we got out, I got out this way. Havel was on this side, Bagley was on this side. The FBI agents went around, and they got out on that side, obviously. Bagley took him to the ground. I took Havel to the ground. And I'm serious, the man was hard as a brick. He was in the best shape he's ever been in his life. I took him to the ground, I'm on top of him, and I'm telling him to put his hands behind his back, and all of a sudden, pow, 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 4 shots ring out. Scared me to death, because they sounded like they were right there next to me. And I knew there wasn't nothing over here but corn, because I saw corn on the other side of the ditch and corn on this side, so I knew there wasn't a whole lot to stop a bullet coming through there. I didn't know who he was shooting at, what he was shooting at, but Richard had the gun, he shot at the helicopter. He shot in the air. What I've learned about Richard McCoy, I don't think he shot at the helicopter. He may have, but I don't think he did. I think he just fired 4 rounds. Irregardless, the helicopter said, I'm out of here. He backed off. Again, it's a weekday. There's no other troopers out. We're the only 2 troopers in the 2 counties out. But we're calling for the cavalry to come. And it took probably 30 minutes before the cavalry get up here. I'm out of action, basically, because I got two of the FBI 10 most wanted men in my custody. So I can't just say, y'all hop in the back seat with 2 FBI agents and take off and go here and fight crime over here. It was, I was sort of tied up. I'm sort of out of action. We told the deputy, do not go down this path. Stay out here on this road. What did the deputy do? Went down the path. He didn't go far, but he went right along here and stopped. That left this bridge here open. There wasn't a whole lot of water in the ditch then, but then the rain filled it up real quick. But with the deputy here, he couldn't see this bridge. Richard and Walker got here. They got over here. They got to the home place. They're home free now. I've heard about 10 different stories about how they got out of Cove City. Finally talked with someone that I could trust, and I knew for a fact he knew what he was talking about. I'm not going to call his name. I'll let you figure that out. But one of his relatives put him in the trunk of the car, and they went to, and a couple of deputies looked in, and this elderly woman driving the car and said, "You need to be careful out here. There's two bad guys loose." She said, "Okay," waved her on. And that was the first night they left. We stayed up here for 2 weeks. Thank goodness we didn't have cell phones, because every 5 minutes, the radio station, A732, reported 2 men on Highway 41 walking down the road. A732 reported 2 men near a house in Cove City. A7, everybody saw 2 men everywhere you looked. They were everywhere, everywhere. But I got those guys in custody, and I tell you, we were talking before everybody got here. They're talking about, well, what did you do with the money? I didn't get the money. I lost $7 in the deal. Here's why. When I got Havel up, got him handcuffed, and he's leaning up against the car with his head. In the field, when you make an arrest, if you find evidence in the right front pocket, you put it in your right front pocket. So when you do your report, you'll know where you got the money from, or whatever evidence, marijuana, whatever, you know, it was in the right front pocket. So it's all I can do to get the wad out of his pockets, all 4 pockets. I mean, it was about like that and stuffed in his pocket. Finally got it out. Well, I carry what little bit of money I have in my left front pocket. I had $7 for dinner that night. Guess where my $7 went? With the stash. Cause I got that out and put it there, and when we counted it, it ended up being $7. So the bank got $7 of my money. 53 years, I ain't got it back yet. They got about 16,000, and Bagley and Havel, the 2 we captured, had about 5,000 between themselves. And most of it was in $20 bills. Plus $5,007. When they left Cove City that night, they went to Tennessee, went to Mississippi, they went back to Virginia Beach. Supposedly, there's not but 2 people that know they're leaving Mississippi and going to Virginia Beach. That's Melvin Dale Walker and Richard Floyd McCoy. Somebody had to tell it. Now, I don't know who had to tell it, but I know somebody that was serving 2 life terms for bank robbery and for stealing an automobile, interstate flight, escape from federal prison, only served 7 years. Now, I'm not saying there was a deal struck, but somebody had to tell that they were leaving Mississippi and going to Virginia Beach. They were out 90 days, they stole $90,000. They robbed banks down there. And about, the FBI was going to hit this house. They went to Virginia Beach, they rented 6 houses in Virginia Beach. Had a pile of money. They rented 6 houses. And what they do, they go stay in this house tonight, then they go across town and stay in this house. So if the FBI couldn't keep up with them, they stayed in 6 different houses. They left that morning, the FBI was going to hit the house at 6 o'clock. And they left the house, all of a sudden about 5 minutes to 6, they come out. And the FBI stands down. Now they're outside hid. They get in the car and they leave. They went and buy groceries. Not going to be obvious buying groceries at 6 o'clock in the morning at a 24-hour grocery store. That's crazy people do that. They're coming back, and they're going in the house. They're going to be in the house. If you got enough agents around that house, why not let them get them in the house, and now you got them contained in one area? Eventually, they're going to come out. Okay? They didn't do that. They went in the house. The agent that went in the house, one of the agents that went in the house with his own personal shotgun. When McCoy and Walker came back, McCoy got out. Walker sat there a few minutes. McCoy walked up to the front door. I'm going to give you the FBI story. McCoy walked up to the front door, opened the door, opened the other door, walked in. He's got a bag of groceries. They jump up and say, FBI. He drops the groceries, pulls his shirt open, Rich pulls his gun out. He fires 1 round. They shoot him with a shotgun. Blows him out the door. He was hit right here. Right here. This is not a death wound. And the heart's down here, but where he was hit was not a death wound. And the angle he was hit was from here. Not across the room from there. The angle was from there. Knocked him out the front door, and they called the rescue. When the rescue arrived, they parked the rescue truck 2 houses down. Richard laid in the yard for 45 minutes and bled out. Took 45 minutes for the rescue. It's 2 houses down in the driveway. They held him off for 45 minutes. Now, O'Hara, the guy that shot Richard, again, the FBI says he was shot. He stood up and shot him across the room. Richard shot up in the roof. The people that bought the house had the house redone. They didn't know the story about the house. Had the house redone. They never found a bullet hole anywhere in the roof where a shot had gone through. And they said he fired 2 rounds. It was never found. They estimated 5'10" to 6 foot. McCoy was 5'11", weight 170, 180, 180. Bottom line is they wore the same exact clothes. Same exact clothes. Person assigned to guard McCoy, John Seiler, one of the United States Marshals, stated that McCoy knew something about the Cooper hijacking that nobody else would have known. And during one of the breaks, McCoy and Seiler were in the holding room back there, and there was a lot of discussion going on about the money, where was the rest of the money, and Seiler said McCoy was laughing at it. He said, "How dumb you got to be to realize you jump out of a plane going 200 miles an hour, money's going everywhere." He said, "Out your pockets, out your hands, up your sleeves." He said, had money everywhere. He told me he had money everywhere. McCoy was always short of money. I told you he was making $370 a month. After the Cooper, the original hijacking, he bought 4 brand new tires for his Volkswagen, and he took the whole family to Cove City, North Carolina. Took them on a vacation on $370 a month. Yep. And both McCoy and Cooper used FAA paper. He covered the peephole because he'd read about that. He told the steward to sit in the seat in front of him and read about that. They have a gas receipt for that Volkswagen with the tags on that Volkswagen from a gas station in Las Vegas, Nevada on Thanksgiving Day. Karen's sister Denise, all testified that they were home on Thanksgiving Day. But there is a gas receipt where they bought gas in Las Vegas on that Volkswagen. There's also a telephone call from the Tropicana Motel in Las Vegas to the McCoy household on Thanksgiving Day, the day of the Cooper hijack. Now, if I got $500,000 and I want to clean it up, let's go to Las Vegas. McCoy was a student at Brigham Young during this. He was out on Thanksgiving holiday, so he couldn't be tracked. He was going to school at Brigham Young. If he'd have took time off from Brigham Young, it would have been noted. School's out, Thanksgiving holiday. Easter, during the McCoy hijacking, school's out, it's spring break. So he don't have any documentation of where he was during that time. Russell Kalani. You can't check it out. They won't let you check it out. Russell wrote this book with Bernie Rhodes. Russell was the FBI agent in charge of the McCoy hijacking. I talked to Russell several times over the years. He died 3 years ago, but I talked to him. He told me without a doubt, D.B. Cooper and Richard Floyd McCoy are one and the same. And that's a great read there. It'll tell you everything you need to know about it. The money was in $20 bills. The money was found from the money he was taking that he stuffed in his pockets. You can jump from an airplane and live. Some people say you can't do it. Richard proved you could do it. On November 9th, he was killed in a shootout. 2 pieces of evidence I mentioned earlier. Remember that? Because it'd be copycats. 2 pieces of evidence. 7 years after McCoy was killed, Russell called Karen and said, "We got a piece of evidence. We want you to look at it. Will you talk to us?" Hung up on him. So they called Denise, who is now home. Denise is Karen's sister. And Denise said, "Yes, be glad to talk to you." So Russell and Bernie go to the FBI evidence. Hadn't been touched in 7 years. They get it out, put it in a brown paper envelope, seal it up. They come to North Carolina. They go in. Denise's mother, Denise, Bernie, and Russell called me. He says, I got something I want to show you, see if you recognize it. They said, okay. You guys that's my age, you remember back in the 70s, we all had a pearl tie tack. And they reached in, they pulled it out, and said, do you recognize this? And in unison, those two ladies said, that's Richards. And Russell said, how do you know it's Richards? And Denise said, because I bought it for him. It was the only tie tack he owned. I gave it to him for a birthday present. That's where Karen turned over and told her that she had been lying, and she drove him to the airport. She gave him the gun. They decided on $500,000. I told you what happened to the money. They laundered it. He got 2 Purple Hearts in Vietnam. Shante sent me a paper that he wrote his freshman year at Brigham Young. It was after he got out of the Army. And it was basically about, are you man enough to kill the enemy? Are you man enough to kill the enemy? And he talked about being in Vietnam and under fire and bullets flinging all around him. And he says it's so bad he's even wondering why he's not getting hit. That's how bad it is. And he sees the Vietnamese running toward him, but diagonally. He's here, and the Vietnamese with a gun holding his side is running diagonally. And he talks about, you know, I'm gonna kill him or he's gonna kill me. And I got 2 choices. I can go take him down physically, or I can kill him. And he said he didn't want to kill him. He said, I knew this man had a family at home just like I did, and I didn't want to kill him. And he said, I stood up and I went running toward him. And there were shots still everywhere. And when I got to him, he fell down. And I fell down. And he said, as I was trying to get up, I felt a burning in my right side, a burning on my left leg. And I realized what had happened. This Vietnamese that was on the ground realized that he was coming to help him. And another Vietnamese was coming, and that Vietnamese shot the other Vietnamese, keep from shooting Richard. That's the famous picture of him coming out of the courthouse. That's the money that was found at Tenor Bar, and there's the tie with the tie tack. I got a friend, a lawyer in Salt Lake City. For the first probably 10 years after the bank robbery, my wife was in the bank the day they got robbed. Now, I'm jumping way, way ahead. My wife was in the bank the day they got robbed. She's never spoke about it, but she knows I like to run my mouth. So she would say, here, talk to him. And she would give me the phone. Well, this guy from Salt Lake City called and said he does a podcast on Saturday morning when I go on it. And so I got to be friends with this attorney. Well, this attorney was friends with Judge Winder. Before he became a federal judge, he was Richard's lawyer in Richard's case, the air piracy case. And Stephen, the lawyer, called the judge's house one day to talk to him. He told his wife, said, he's out there in that garden, hold on and let me go get him. She comes back, picks up the phone, she said, I guess you want to talk about McCoy. And he said, yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, did the judge ever tell you about the time that when Richard was in Vietnam, there was a guy in the platoon next to him that he just could not stand, and that his name was Dan Cooper? And Richard said, no, ma'am, the judge has never told me that, and you probably shouldn't be telling me that either. Newsflash, December 12th, 2021. Investigator Dan Grider out of Atlanta, Georgia releases D.B. Cooper Deep Family Secrets on YouTube. I'd urge you to read that. Deep FBI Secrets and Deep Family Secrets on YouTube. Grider had been trying for years. Dan Grider does a show called Probable Cause. He investigates airplane crashes. And he is obsessed, as I am, with this case. He'd been trying to get to talk to either Shante or Rick for a long time. And in May of 2021, he received a call from Shante stating that they had discussed this. She had discussed it with her brother, and they wanted to set the record straight. Her mom had died, and Miss Myrtle had died. So there's nobody left to indict for what happened. Miss Myrtle could have been, and Karen could have been indicted, but they died the same year. And these two kids have lived with this burden for 53 years. In the YouTube video by Dan Grider, both kids openly admit that their dad, Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., and D.B. Cooper are one and the same. Both of them have said that. Richard's sister-in-law, Denise, also changed her story on the video. She babysitted the kids in 1971 for 4 days during the Thanksgiving break, and that she had lied to the FBI telling them she was having Thanksgiving dinner with Richard and Karen, when in fact Richard and Karen were pulling the Cooper hijacking. Dan contacted me on December the 16th, and we finally talked. We talked about 2 hours on the phone. Brian had done a video of me at the office, the same thing I'm doing now, and Brian put that on video on YouTube, and Dan saw it and watched it. Shantae saw it and watched it, and Dan and I agree on every single point that I've made tonight. But I've been giving this talk probably 40 years, and I've always thought about, man, wouldn't it be great if I could say, Shantae said or Richard said, wouldn't that be cool? So I asked Dan, I said, only ask you something. I said, is there any chance in the world that I could talk to Shantae or Rick? He said, yeah. He said, I'll have her call you in a few minutes. I'm going, oh, yeah, okay. About 2 hours later, the phone rang, and I picked it up and looked. It said, Shantae McCoy. She called, and we talked for about 2 hours. She wanted to know every single thing that happened. And she told me that this is it in a nutshell. She wants everyone to know that she and her brother have carried a heavy load for the last 53 years and want the world to know they are sorry. She was very sincere about being sorry. She was very, very sincere. And when I finally got a chance to meet them, both of them were. And on 30 June 2012, I was contacted by Dan Grider. That's Dan on the right. But they were both, the biggest thing, they wanted the world to know that they were sorry about what happened. They wished it would have never happened. And they wanted to stress that their daddy never hurt anyone. And he didn't. He never hurt a soul. And I heard both of them look me in the eye and said, my daddy was D.B. Cooper. There you go. Look familiar? That's the first generation away, one generation away from a composite drawing. When I asked her today, I said, I got a picture of you when we were at the graveyard. I said, I've zoomed in on you and put it beside one of the composite drawings of Cooper. She said, wait a minute, Johnny, are you saying I'm Dan Cooper? I said, no, but you sure look a lot like him, girl. Dan got permission. If you know, this tombstone is here. There's a mobile home here, and there's an old barn over here. Grider went back and said, whose barn is that? He said, Aunt Myrtle. And he said, can we go in? He said, yeah, she's dead. Nobody cares. So they went in the barn. Well, Dan goes in there. Dan Grider is like a child at Christmas. He's in this great big barn with all these boxes that belongs to Richard Floyd McCoy and Miss Myrtle McCoy. And he goes to digging. And the first thing he finds is a book. If you skydive, if you practice, if you skydive, you got to fill the log out. You got to log it down. From August to November, McCoy logged 8 jumps. After November, none, until March. One practice jump in March, skyjacking in April. Dan gets opening these boxes and he grabs something and starts pulling on it. Starts pulling on this line. Starts pulling, and out comes this casing that's been altered with the pull handle from this side to this side. Done deal. He pulls it out, he finds that book, and he finds that parachute. Richard called the FBI and said, we have this. Do y'all want to look at it? And they said, yeah, we'll take a peek at it. And he made an appointment to come down and for them to get that. And Richard said, he said, I've never seen so many police cars. Black Suburbans, they said they were everywhere. There was a whole convoy pulled in. He said, I didn't know it was going to take that many people to take 2 pieces of evidence back. But they took it. That was 2 years.
Coming up on 2 years. Yeah.
Coming up on 2 years ago. They won't tell Richard or Shantae anything about it. But folks, I'm not real smart, but if they want nothing there, give it back to them. And they won't get Richard signed something for them to keep it until they got through with it. So they still have it. They took a DNA from Richard, took two DNAs from Richard to make sure that they'd have a good one. Now you know the real final story.
So if you don't mind me, Johnny, real quick,
Sure.
The reason we're here from TV 12 is I've been following this story for a long time. I mean, as a kid, I knew about the story. Fascinating. A guy jumps out of a plane with money, never heard from again. I used to watch the History Channel specials. It's a fascinating story. One day I'm on Facebook and Jerry Avery, who owns all the Sun Journal newspapers, posts about our D.B. Cooper. I'm like, what the heck? What? I have this theory that everything is somehow connected with Eastern North Carolina. Every famous person's either been through here, has a cousin here, or something. It's amazing. So I go, here we go again, D.B. Cooper. So I started diving in to these articles. I didn't know Jerry at the time, but I just saw his post, so I started diving in. So I got to know. So I drive through Cove City. I see a bunch of McCoys. I go on Facebook. I start just randomly messaging any McCoy. Hey, are you related to Richard Floyd McCoy? About 5 of them didn't answer me, but finally one person said, distantly, we're not going to talk about it, but find a guy named Johnny Surles. So I find a guy named Johnny Surles and whoom, right? This all opens up. He shows me the presentation, become good friends with Jerry. This leads to, I actually got an interview with Richard Floyd McCoy III. Rick, who looks a lot like him. Didn't know his dad that well. He only remembers visiting him in prison in Lewisburg, but he's heard all the family stories. There's a lot of interesting things that he revealed to me in this long interview we did. So I've got these interviews. I've got Johnny. I've got Bob Shields. I've got Rick, but we're always, what makes it new? What's different than anybody else has at this point? And then boom, Bob Grider, who's done a great job with all of this, claims that they found the parachute. So Bob claimed, Dan Grider claimed that the FBI would not take his phone call. And this is all just circumstance. Rick had told me of the story of how he has his dad's old Rolex. So my first thought is, he used the D.B. Cooper money and bought this Rolex, right? Turns out when he was in Vietnam, he got a knockoff Rolex, but it was his. And when Richard was killed by the FBI, Bob Shields had to return some of his effects to Karen. And one of the things he remembers was this Rolex. So he said he vividly remembered it. So I messaged Rick. I go, you never know what happened to this Rolex? He goes, yeah, I have it. So I'm like, can I see it? He goes, yeah, stop by. So I was going to see my family up in upstate New York, and I was driving through. He lives up near Richmond now. And he gives me directions to his place. I stop in. He's showing me the Rolex. It's really cool. I go, anything else happen in the case that I should know about? He goes, oh, yeah, we found the parachute. I go, wait, what? You buried the lead here, Rick. The FBI shuttered the case in 2016 and said they'd only open it if there was new evidence presented. So I said, well, did Dan call the FBI? He says they hung up on him. I said, that doesn't sound right. Let me talk to my people. So I get back into Craven County. David McFadden, who knows everybody, I said, Dave, you know FBI? He goes, yeah. Why? I tell Dave. He gets all excited about it. So we get a meeting with the FBI agents, tell them all about it, and then they immediately contact Rick. He makes sure that they sign. He's going to get the parachute back. He took his DNA. The last thing that he has heard is that they were talking about possibly exhuming the body for DNA evidence. They're still trying to figure out if that's what they want to do, because there was partial DNA on the tie, the black tie. And I'm trying to think. I thought there was someplace else they may have found some partial DNA.
They kept talking about the tie, not the tie tag, but the clip.
Yeah.
But that's.
It's not a lot. It's been compromised a lot, but
been touched by hundreds of people.
Yeah, there are some partial DNA. So if they could somehow match those up, so it sounds like not giving the parachute back. Sounds like it might be the parachute. DNA they're trying to match up. The FBI is going through some problems right now. New administration, a lot of moving parts. I'm hearing East Coast and West Coast FBI can't quite get on the same plane. And it's not the highest priority for them still. Now, if any of you has a hotline to Donald Trump, I'm sure that if you told him he could be the president who was in charge of solving the D.B. Cooper case, he'd get the FBI right on it. We could probably get this thing done. But in the meantime, while we wait, now that we have the new evidence, we're actually going to do a little half-hour special on Richard Floyd McCoy and his connection to D.B. Cooper. Probably going to do it end of March, beginning of April, about the time that he did his Utah jump to kind of coincide with that. So we're still gathering some evidence. I still have to talk to Paul Weber and Dan Greider. Those are kind of missing parts of the smoking gun, per se. But we're always interested in anybody who wants to talk about Richard. And so it seems like some of you who knew him, or if anybody wants to give us your take, and we're not looking for you to be culpable for the case or have any of the money or anything, but we're trying to piece it together. And what ultimately the family says they want is their dad was a war hero who was treated poorly when he returned, trying to do the honest thing in making a living. He was trying to get into law enforcement. He had issues with what they think was Agent Orange, and he was having some issues where he could not pass the required test to be in law enforcement, and that he was frustrated, and that's why he came up with the scheme.
PTSD.
And PTSD and all those things. That's why he came up with a scheme to try and steal the money. And then, when he was only partially successful, he worked out the bugs, and 6 months later, he has a much more successful jump where we know he escaped with every dollar and spent 30 of them. They did not say anything until Karen and Myrtle passed away, because they didn't want them to be charged in the case.
There were only two left that could be charged.
Yeah. So that's when they finally came out and went public, when they had both passed away within, 8 months of each other? 10 months of each other, something like that. They both died, I think, in the same year. So that's why they're talking about it. And they say they don't want any money. They just want their dad's name to be cleared. And yeah, give him credit for doing this thing that is still kind of legendary, right? And the reasons he did it was because the country didn't have his back at the time.
Think for a moment how much money those two kids could make if they wrote a book. Literally millions. And like you said, everybody knows Richard Floyd McCoy and D.B. Cooper. But they're not looking for that.
And I always say, as being a news person, I like to be fair. I like to have facts. And this whole time I've been studying this case with Richard Floyd McCoy is prove to me it's not him. I've asked Johnny, I've asked everybody. I can't find a reason why it's not him. Thank you. Give Johnny a big hand, please, for all the work he's done. He's been on this thing for decades, and it's just amazing. And now that's all kind of hopefully coming to a head here. He's the guy who's been responsible for all this knowledge. So.